amount of time. Today's session focuses on loss and damage, which is a key topic in the current climate change debate with different views and perspectives, and we hope to have an engaging discussion around this. This class will last around 1 hour and is targeted specifically at young people. It will be divided into 3 segments. We will first have an introduction to the topic and how it is relevant for the current negotiations, delivered by Eva Mukairanga and Shreya Kessi from the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, who are there. This will be followed by a second intervention on the analysis of what constitutes loss and damage and how to calculate it, delivered by Mr. Alvaro Rojas Ferreira, Senior Project Associate at UNU Institute for Environment and Human Security. And then we will have the possibility to exchange and have a dialogue around the presentations and ask any question you may want to ask our speakers. And this will be also moderated in collaboration with a fourth expert, Irfan Hulla from UNICEF and the Global Center on Adaptation Youth Advisor. We will then close the session and continue with the program of today. Now, before we start with the first presentation, we want to take a minute to understand who is in the room with us. So I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you come from one of the following regions. So who is from Africa here? Okay, good representation. Who is from Asia originally? Okay, 3-4 people. Who is from Europe? Myself as well. Who is from the Middle East? One representative, great. And from the Pacific, anyone? Perhaps online. And who among you is a scientist? Any scientists? North America, right. And Latin America. Anyone from North America? Perfect. Anyone from Latin America then? Great. I've done the tour of the world right now. Just a couple of more questions. I wanted to understand who is with us also in terms of your background. So, as I said, who is a scientist? Any scientists here? Maybe. Okay. NGO representative? Okay. Negotiators? Okay, quite a mix. And an international organization representative? Okay, a very good mix. I think they will lead to great discussions. Thank you so much for being here, and I give the floor to our first speakers, Eva and Shreya, who will give a presentation about loss and damage. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Namaste. My name is Shreya. I am from Nepal. I'm representing Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, and I will be just talking about the basics, ABC of loss and damage.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eva Mukairanga. I'm also part of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us here today. So as I said before, I will be just talking the basics, the brief about loss and damage, why we are talking about loss and damage, what is loss and damage, and why it is so serious and urgent issue that needs to be addressed. So if we see, I think like loss and damage can be referred to as a term under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that refers to the impact of climate change when the threshold of adaptation is crossed. So we know that the sorry sorry, yeah, I think it's good. Thank you. Yeah, so I was saying it is a term under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is used to refer to the impact of climate change that goes beyond when we cross the threshold of adaptation. So if we see the current global warming is like around 1.2 degrees Celsius. So even though we are not yet reached to 1.5, even though like we are in 1.2, the impact of climate change has already been so severe. So there are limit to the adaptation work that we can do. So when the limit is crossed, so we talk about loss and damage. So it is referred to as the negative impact of climate change that is not avoided even after the mitigation and adaptation work. And in loss and damage also, so we can say that there are both slow onset event and hard onset event. For example, loss and damage can also be seen as like increase in the sea level, or like ocean acidification, salination, that becomes like severe and severe as we go time. But then there are also hard extreme events such as the loss of livelihoods from a big violent storm, floods, even cyclones. So that can be referred as the hard onset event. And so loss and damage, so there is like two different terms. So loss is like the things that is irreplaceable. For example, when we have like huge disaster flood that swipes away an entire village, then that can be referred as irreplaceable. For example, I come from Nepal, a Himalayan country that has like world's highest mountain in the world. My hometown is Solukhumbu, which lies at the lap of Himalayas. So we always lie at the forefront of facing this impact of glacial lake outburst flood. So we always live in that risk. So there are cases then when one flood has swept away an entire village, so that can be referred as an irreplaceable damage for us. And then the replaceable is like that can be replaced. For example, if the developmental infrastructures are destroyed by the climate change related impact, then that can be replaced. Like so that can be referred as replaceable. So here is also like there are two different terms that we say, monetary and non-monetary. So like monetary loss are those like where we can put money to. For example, if I lose a house, then maybe I can put a money on that. So that is like monetary loss. But then if we have like loss of lives, loss of livelihood, loss of biodiversity, or loss of even indigenous cultures, local knowledge, then that can be referred as non-monetary value, because it's very hard to put a price on this thing. So what happened last year was like maybe in 2020 during monsoon in June and July, we had like 3 days of like continuous rainfall. And then in Tarai region in Nepal, so a girl of 3 days old, she was dead. And like because the flood was so huge and severe, so like her dead body was lying in that place like for like the next 1 week, because like there was no way to bring her body back to that. So like you can imagine the uh, sadness the family that fell. So like that can be referred as a like non-monetary loss value. So this is also like quite mentioned in the loss and damage topic. So yeah, that is about the basics of loss and damage. And if we see like loss and damage was brought in the like negotiations, in the discussions by AOC's Alliance of Small Island States, even before UNFCCC was formally established in 1995. So in 1991 they brought this issue. So like there was no such huge momentum across loss and damage during that time. So until it was in Bali, maybe in COP13 in 2007, and then we had that also led to the establishment. Like after that there was huge momentum on loss and damage and so on, and that led to the establishment of what's international mechanism on loss and damage. And then we can find single standing article on loss and damage in the Paris Agreement also. It is referred in the Article 8, so that is how it is like included in the loss and damage processes. And I'm also following the global stocktake process. So global stocktake is like a kind of comprehensive assessment of the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. And like there are 4 different topics that has been prioritized: mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, means of implementation, and the next one is holistic solutions. So inside the adaptation and loss and damage, also loss and damage is like quite talked upon. So today is also like from 1 p.m. there is World Cafe where there are topics about loss and damage. So I think the opening plenary is also happening on, and then there is a separate roundtable on adaptation and loss and damage where there will be discussions on loss and damage, like what are the challenges, what are the good practices, and so on. So yeah, now going deeper into the negotiations, I'll give the floor back to Eva to talk more on this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, and I'll continue with what's happening within the UNFCCC around loss and damage. So loss and damage is more integrated into the Paris Agreement within the Article 8. But so far, there have been, as Shreya mentioned, the loss and damage was brought out in 1991, but there has been some development and progress achieved on loss and damage. So you can find loss and damage within the Paris Agreement on Article 8, but there was also the establishment of the Santiago Network for loss and damage. This was an outcome for the review of the Warsaw International Mechanism, which was established also to address loss and damage. But within the WIM, they identified 3 functions, and the third one was enhancing action and support, including finance and technology and capacity building. So during the review of the WIM, they saw that the third review of action and support is not very well implemented. So at COP25, that's when the Santiago Network for Loss and Damage was established with mission of Regional SA to catalyze the technical assistance from relevant organizations and to provide it to vulnerable countries. So that's when the Santiago Network was established, and during COP26, they agreed on the function of the Santiago Network, and during COP27, they have agreed on the institutional arrangement of the Santiago Network. This includes a host secretariat, an advisory body, and also a network of different organizations. During this SB session, there have been 2 proposals for hosting the secretary of the Santiago Network. That's what the parties will be discussing on. So the first proposal is from UNDRR, and the second proposal is from the Caribbean Development Bank. So hoping that parties will select a host secretary for the Santiago Network and be approved at COP28. And there's also the Glasgow Dialogue, which is also a place where loss and damage is being discussed. The Glasgow Dialogue came, developing countries and the G77 proposed during COP26 to have a loss and damage finance facility, but this wasn't achieved. But as a compromise, there was a decision to establish the Glasgow Dialogue. And there has been, right now, there will be the second Glasgow Dialogue during the SB sessions. And so far, the first fear was that the Glasgow Dialogue won't lead to an outcome of a loss and damage fund. But during COP27, parties agreed to establish a loss and damage fund and the funding arrangement on loss and damage. So the focus of this Glasgow Dialogue will be on making sure that operationalizing the loss and damage fund, and also the element of the funding arrangement for loss and damage. So yeah, and in terms of where loss and damage finance is also discussed, there's different discussion on like the new collective quantified goal, which is the post 2020, post 100 billion goal. It's also a place where loss and damage is being discussed, as that we will have like a target, a goal which will address mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. So that's one area also that finance for loss and damage is discussed. In terms of LDYC, we have been developing demands to support the advocacy for loss and damage finance. Excuse the typo, it's not the COP27 presidency open letter, but rather the SB 58 demand from youth is that loss and damage finance needs to be new and additional to existing climate finance available, also predictable and adequate. It's also that we operationalize the loss and damage fund at COP28, and also that youth be included in decision making. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Eva and Shea, for this introduction. I'll now give the floor to Alvaro for the second part on what constitutes loss and damage.
Yeah, so hello. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to see all these people here. My name is Alvaro Rojas, and I work in the analytics teams at UNUEHS. My focus is on analytics, and we're working on loss and damage as a way to support the process. I want to thank UNCC Learn for having me here. We always talk about the importance of capacity building and getting the support from the youth and different constituencies in building these tools. We don't believe so much in top-down tools that tell people what's wrong or what they need. We really would like to make this collaborative. So I named this presentation co-creating tools for loss and damage, because the approach that we always base is very strongly supported by consultation but also collaboration, and our hope is always that whatever work we do could be further taken by local experts, and in our experience youth play a very important role in that, building that expertise and then taking this expertise further. So really thank you for having us here today. um, just we can move to the next slide. I like to be repetitive. I come from academia, so I repeat myself a lot. This is take home messages, and I will bring them back at the end of the presentation. There are 4 take-home messages. The recommendation is always having 3, but I don't follow recommendations. Loss and damage is an evolving topic, politically, technically, and for implementation. So thanks to the great feedback that we on introduction that we have, I think you understand now better that there are different agendas. Some of them are conflicting, some of them are conspiring, and they have brought this topic up to now, bringing in different perspectives. There were some concerns. There were some people that were very against it. But now we are where we are. Um, but the topic is not set. So there are new ways in which we understand how these loss and damages are happening, different regions, different voices, and it's important that we address that topic as such, in my opinion. The second one is there are significant gaps conceptually in evidence and technical tools and solutions. Of course, if the topic is not set, there is a lot that we still need to do in terms of documenting it and addressing it. I think up until not so far away, far back, sorry, we didn't know how this loss and damage topic would be addressed. So there were many wording against it, around it, losses and damages and other damages and losses, ways around it because of political reasons. But now we are sitting in a spot in which we need to have specific solutions that address that. But for that, we would need a lot of support, and we would need different groups to play different roles to understand it properly. And there's a lot of work there to be done. The third point is analytics tools offer bridge between concept and decision making. So I think, I don't know how many colleagues here do engineering or love your math or love your numbers. I do. And the reason I do is because they help inform. They're not the only or most efficient way to inform in all scenarios, but very often putting a dollar sign next to what we can talk about is useful for both action and understanding what steps to be taken. So analytic tools are that bridge to inform those decisions, and it's only as useful as those decisions can be made. So if we produce analytics that people don't aren't able to understand or to process or incorporate in their day by day, then we failed. It's not just for the sake of having an academic exercise. The last point is technical assistance needs to be accessible, scalable, and flexible. And today, collaborating with CC Learn, I think they are the utmost experts on knowing how challenging the capacity building process can be. So it is not enough to have the knowledge, or that the knowledge exists. It is important that the right people have it and knows how to use it and are able to adjust it and adapt it to their needs. And then for that collaboration, local skill development are the best base for addressing this challenge. So again, that's why we're so happy to be here. I will come back to these 4 points at the end, and I hope my other slides make the point. But if not, please ask me, why did you say this is a takeaway message, take-home message, and you didn't talk about it? Please. Conceptual spectrum. There is this idea of constructive ambiguity regarding loss and damage. What that means is that so far we didn't need one only agreement of what loss and damage is. This is a paper published by Boyd and others in 2017, but I think it still reflects very much a lot of what the previous presentation was presenting, and is that there has been an evolution and different groups see loss and damage in different terms. So we see here on a spectrum from adaptation and mitigation to an existential threat. So where do we put loss and damage in that spectrum? That grows through risk management and also limits to adaptation. Again, as the colleagues before said, the SEEDs, the small island development states, were leading in this idea that this loss and damage are existential. But different groups at least have expressed more compatibility with some concept and other. Not to say that everybody in this group thinks this way. But yeah, for example, in the field that I normally work with, adaptation, we do think about loss and damages and that stage of when adaptation is not anymore possible, right? But there are different definitions of it and different way to address it. We have here the WIM and the Paris Agreement, and this has been useful in terms of progressing the discussions. The idea of not having to set on what specifically is a loss and what specifically is a damage has been useful to at least bring the topic further. However, in order to implement some of these measures, further work needs to happen, and that doesn't mean that at political level it needs to have an agreement, but there are certain agreements that need to be made in order to have, for example, harmonized systems to monitor that. We have here in the room, I think, colleagues from UNDR who's doing an amazing job at building a database, a platform to collect some of this data. Some countries are already working on this, so it's not like no work it's been done there, but in order to harmonize and have progress, we would need to have a bit more of an agreement. The next, we're going to spend a bit more time in this slide. These are the big key knowledge and conceptual gaps that we have identified, but of course, again, this is an evolving topic. The first one is quantification and valuation. Again, this might sound a bit geeky, but it's very important to have standardized methodologies and approaches to assess and quantify and identify the value of what's been lost and been damaged. The colleagues before as well introduced the concept of non-economic and economic losses. The line there, the way I see it, it's the term market. So it's when loss and damage can be market valued, then it's economic. When it cannot, it's a non-economic. Those are not exclusive terms. Something can have economic and non-economic impacts. So we can think, for example, as people. If somebody's lives are lost, for example, these people will have an impact on the economy. Maybe that is marketable. We don't know how much. We can estimate how much that loss of life will cost into the business or whatever activity they were doing. But furthermore, and maybe more importantly, like what are the impacts that this will have for their family, for the culture, the trauma that it may cause. So one fact doesn't exclude the other, unfortunately. There's also the discussion on loss and damage on onset versus sudden impacts, events, right? So sudden events, adaptation and risk management have already worked with them a lot, which is a hurricane, flood, drought, although drought is a bit more of a longer term, but those are extreme events, right, within the average conditions that happen during a period of time. There are these low onset events, and the obvious case is sea level rise, which is something that it takes longer but have much more of a consistent impact on livelihoods. There are solutions and measures are not the same, and quantifying those and evaluating those, it's also a very different challenge. Second is attribution and causality. This is about estimating how much climate change has actually linking climate change to these impacts. So some of this, economic and non-economic impact. There are challenges in doing that, doing it timely. The efforts that are available now are normally done for like very large scale events. But if we want to estimate this and take some measures and from different perspectives, this is a field in which progress needs to be done. Regional and sectoral variations, there are imbalance in data and documentation, and there's also imbalance in the voices that have made science available. So the countries that produce scientific research are the scientific research comes overwhelmingly from the global north. Um, that is something that we really need to figure out ways to address it in a ways that are effective. I'm a big fan of AI as maybe providing the tool to support this, but that is just my opinion. There's also data limitation, again, in the way we've documented it through time and the way we're documenting, especially slow onset events and non-economic losses. And then that leads us to the fifth point, which is social and non-economic losses. There is heritage, there's also trauma, there is several things, but it's important here to understand that it is not just about data, numerical data, one, qualitative data too, but it's also very often we lack a system to incorporate storytelling in a way that is effective. Very often we, for the non-economic losses and damages, we need to hear what happened from people that goes beyond a number. So I met this colleague from Vanuatu, and she was expressing a lot of sorrow because her family, her kids, her childhood, the memories of her childhood are all surrounded coconut and desserts and coconut food and mixes. And she said that because of some climate impacts, her children now are 10 years and they haven't grown or experienced this in the way she have. So how do you document that? How do you quantify that? How do you aggregate or harmonize those type of experiences? That is a big challenge. And addressing it will need the support of everyone. As I said, for me, it's very comforting seeing all of these young faces because we need ideas. We need your experience and your work on the ground to understand this and say, okay, we have these suggestions. We've learned to do it in this way. How could we make this compatible with other analytic tools? Forward-looking approaches, there's a lot of discussion on the loss and damage that has already been caused. That is easier in the middle of this complex landscape that I'm painting for you. But it's much easier than document what will happen in the future. There are uncertainties. The models also don't have the resolution that is needed in certain places. So what do we do there? And finally, governance and finance. Again, the colleagues before talked about finance, and there's the transitional committee and others that talk about the importance of finance. But my area of expertise is analytics. We do marginally engage with finance and governance part, but there are big gaps there. And how can the analytics tool inform that? It's important. That's a lot of information. I know I saw some of you taking screenshots, and I'm very, very happy to discuss with you further. Can we move to the last one? The Santiago Network, again, introduced more awesomely by my previous colleagues. It's taking place. These are my personal notes. Please don't document this as anything official. This is my personal notes from the workshop in Santiago on technical assistant needs. This is how I classify them. This is a very traditional, non-innovative, non-groundbreaking way to document those points. Technology transfer, governance, capacity building, and facilitation. In particular, the last field, facilitation. It's important for scientists because I work as well with science, and we are unable to keep up with all this evolving knowledge. So there is often the scientific community, and the IPCC does a terrific job on compiling and bringing some key messages from the scientific community, but we're always running behind. So sometimes we say, oh, the science is set on this and that. Well, first, that's an interesting question because the nature of science is to question. That is the full point of science. But also keeping behind what is needed and being able to provide information of how to monitor, for example, again, trauma, how to monitor or what is the nature or estimating, for example, migration. It's not that there is not a lot of science on it. There is, but being able to provide specific information that leads to solution, it's time consuming. So, for example, getting this research agenda in which we identified the needs, and guess what? I'm going back to throw the ball to you guys, how the youth and new generations can really push and lead in this research. It's extremely, extremely important. And There's also the topic of standards there, documenting, identifying loss and damage. It's also something that may sound obvious, but it's not so to identify loss and damage. Sometimes we are much better, many countries are much better at identifying during the recovery phase what is needed right after an event happens. But with slow onset events, are we really looking at all of the impacts that are happening? Do we really know them? I would argue not really. Institutional guidance and others. There are also some transformational solutions. I like a lot the first one. Models are, again, climate models are mostly, if not uniquely, in the hands of developed countries, with developing countries and least developed country scientists. I'm not saying pointing that in any different way, but having some of these projects hosted and led by local scientists could make a difference in terms of some of the experts we talk about is just clarification, having the local office in a municipality doing a research and being able to call the university, talk with their in the language, asking for explanation. That could make a huge difference in how we use the data and the information we have, and how we adjust it to our conditions, because we will never have a model that tells us centimeter by centimeter what will happen, but maybe adjust it better with their knowledge. We go to my last slide. I think that was longer than 10 minutes. I apologize for that. And my take-home messages. Loss and damage is an evolving topic, politically, technically, and for implementation. So just keep in mind that sometimes these agenda also conflict with each other. So it's important to know that. There are significant gaps conceptually in evidence and technical tools. Analytics tools offer a bridge between some of this knowledge and decision making. And technical assistance needs to be accessible, scalable, and flexible. Collaboration and local skill development are the base for addressing this challenge at a global scale. So I hope you, with this, at least you have asked yourself, how can I contribute, or the people that I know contribute, because this cannot be left in the hands of the others. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you very much, Alvaro, for this interesting presentation. We are now moving to the third part dedicated to the dialogue, where you can ask any questions you may want to ask our experts. To kickstart the discussion, I'll give the floor to Irfan, who will co-moderate this segment for a brief introduction.
Hello everyone, thanks for you, Alvaro, and Shay, you somehow have like a very good picture. You explained it very well, that what actually loss and damage mean and how it work in real world in implementation. But maybe I see a lot of young people here, and maybe you are wondering how you can get involved in this whole process of loss and damage negotiation, and what we are at the best entry point are, we can say it's sweet spot where you can jump in. I think the first, because there's two streams at the moment. One is when ExCom meeting works, and they meet twice per year. So you can follow their work. You can get involved through Yango, because there's also a representation from Yango, and then also you can follow the work of TC Transition Committee, which is specifically focusing on loss and damage fund operationalization. I think so. It's really important that young people should be on the table, and the young people should come up with concrete, I would say, recommendation, not just something very general, but maybe more specific, and it should be somehow what youth can offer. And how they can offer and where they can bring the expertise to the table. So that's the second, I would say, the entry point where you can get involved. And the third and most important, you can get involved in your local and community level. So we call it a locally led locally led loss and damage initiative. So I think so that will be some of the area where you can get involved. And also we from UNICEF side soon will we start the consultation process with young people from around the globe to see their perspective, what they think about this fund and how they want this fund to be operationalized. So you can also be part of our consultation process, where you can share your insight, your perspective with us, that how you can add to this TC work negotiation, and then we can look for some sweet spot where we can fit in your perspective, your demand, your key ask. That's actually all from my side, and no, we are really looking forward to your questions. So feel free.
Can I add something? Sorry. For the transitional committee in particular, they were compiling case studies. I think the original call for case studies is closed, but they are open to receive more. A case study could be just an experience of how loss and damage has been expressing or is it's happening in your communities or with the people you know. Also, what of that is being addressed and what isn't. I think in particular cultural values is something that is threatened by this many of these phenomenon and migration, for example, that takes people from one spot to another. And just having a case study, a one pager, a two pager in which we tell the story of people going through this could really be a great contribution. So just for you maybe to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you so much for all these interventions. A lot of content, a lot of interesting entry points, data analysis. At this point, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Please.
Can you describe more about that one? Sorry, could you speak in the mic? Yeah. Then everyone online can't hear you. There's a lot of press. Okay. Irfan, can you tell us more about the fund that you're speaking of? Are you talking about like the loss and damage fund or like a separate UNICEF fund?
Sure. So I was actually referring to loss and damage fund and loss and damage fund operationalization, which have been decided upon last year at Sharm el Sheikh. And now recently there's work been happening from transitional committee members and a lot of representation also from civil society, from youth are there on the table where they are collecting somehow the insight how they want the fund to be operationalized, who will pay for the fund and how the fund will be I would say how the fund will go and flow to the people on the ground. So they are like some guiding question also for the parties and non-party actors to kind of see and try that how they want this fund to be. And yes, there's work happening, and if you are interested, so you can take a look at the transition committee UNFCCC website. So they're having all the information. So they will having third workshop in Bangkok, I think so in July. So you can join virtually, and it's, I think so it's really important. I would really suggest young people to come and somehow follow this whole process of negotiation. And maybe if anyone add to the question, so feel free. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Is it working? I guess my question is more on the technical end. Is there a gap, or has it also been researched to understand how can we grab this data or visualize it at the same time during times of conflict? Because sometimes that can be hard to address what are the different needs, especially because things are not like they're dynamic in that situation and time. So I'm wondering if that kind of theme or area focus is being addressed with regard to the loss and damage as well.
I'm sorry to give you a very general answer, but the answer is not enough, and that answer applies to many things. Yes, in fact, we had a case study, but that was for adaptation with Ethiopia, and there was the conflict there that was in the northern region, and that definitely affected our ability to follow the project, but also I understand the needs to communicate with the communities, right, and understand what was happening. Also, conflicts are quite unique, so it's really hard to know, for example, how long they will last and how some of the long-term impacts. So there is research on it for sure. The overlap or the additionality that will cause due to climate change, it's hard to estimate. It's hard to attribute, but it's definitely a lens that is needed, and it's a lens that is brought up. I remember last year in COP by Afghanistan, for example, in which they were saying, okay, there's a lot of attention that for many reasons we're receiving, but we're also losing a lot of the support, and the need's still there. The suffering is still there. So yeah, definitely, it's a heavy complication. And again, in terms of analytics and quantification, to estimate how much worse the loss will be in the conditions of conflict, for example, that would be a very hard number to get there. But any ideas, suggestions, or feedback that could be given in that, sometimes you just need to go with a rough estimation because you need to come up with a number, but it's not easy. And again, local insight is always super valuable. I hope that I answer your question.
Just a quick follow-up comment. So UNICEF mentioned you have an open consultation with youth. Is that going to be also addressed in this space, or will UNICEF be taking it individually?
So yeah, UNICEF will start very soon the consultation process. So we're having a partner, Yango for sure will be there, and LDYC, Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, and also we are thinking of involving the broader UNMGCY, United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. So our focus is on youth for sure, but also we want to bring children to this whole process of loss and damage fund and fund operationalization. So we will share soon the updates on it, the exact dates when it's gonna be happen, and yeah, hopefully you will receive the email soon in coming weeks or two. Yeah. But also feel free to write an email so if you're interested more in our work, and if you are interested to get involved in UNICEF work, which we do, so feel free.
Thank you for your presentations. I'd like to ask, you mentioned that loss and damage funding and loss and damage financing. So I'd like to ask, what is the difference between the conventional insurance mechanisms and the loss and damage funding and financing? Thank you.
So the transitional committee right now is focusing on gaps, right? So at least my interpretation of how I follow the negotiation. So there is some finance that it's covering some of those needs. Insurance, for example, is very useful for extreme events. There's a lot of progress on something that is called parametric insurance, which don't need to go and quantify the damages, but once the environmental conditions, the weather conditions reach a certain level of precipitation or heat or something, it triggers already some payments. So the insurance is definitely a useful tool to address some of these, provide finance timely to avoid further losses and damages. But of course, it's not the only solution. There are different funds. There is something called the Global Shield. They will come up with some solutions themselves. There will be the UN fund and finance that will be defining by the end of the year, needs to be operationalized. Let's see how that will look like, but there's really smart, really capable and interested people working on that. But insurance would be my answer. My quick answer to that would be part of it. It is needed. There are many places in the world, developing and least developed countries, in which insurance is not available for those who are in need. We also have done an assessment recently on Southeast Asia, for example, and some of the countries in which the losses are the highest. The insurance enabling environment is non-existent or non-adequate. So it is a solution. It needs to be worked out. It needs to be improved, but it's not a silver bullet. So there will need to be many other solutions. Some of them grants. There are there's a layering system that suggests different types of solutions for some of them, so the countries don't rely on emergency relief only. It's part of it, I would say.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to what Alvaro mentioned. So yeah, insurance is for sure one of the funding arrangement, but it's not a silver bullet for sure. So there's could be other options in which are also under consideration in the TC Transitional Committee, and it could be blue bond, levies, taxation on polluter. So there are many options for the funding arrangement, and insurance is one of them. Yeah.
Great. I think we have time for one final question, either from the audience or also online. If there are any questions online, please don't hesitate to share, and then we'll have to wrap up the session. Perfect. We have one final here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. So I really love the newsletter of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. Thank you for that. It's very informative. For you, what would you say, how would you like us to get involved with Loss and Damage Youth Coalition? And where would you like to see that coalition head to in the future? Like, what kind of activities would you like to expand to? Thank you.
Thank you for asking the question. So, if you go to the Loss and Damage website, there is a membership form which you can apply, and then you will receive the email from the communications team to be a member. There are different working groups, training, advocacy, and so on. So, I'm in the advocacy working group, so we prioritize more on like what is happening in the negotiation, how can young people build our position forward, and so on. So we work on so many different things. So there is absolutely an opportunity to work in those aspects. So I think, yeah, if you fill those membership form, you will receive all of the information on how to be engaged, and you can also choose on which specific part you want to work on. If you want to add.
Yeah, just to add on all of the colleagues mentioned the storytelling. I think we're all being feeling loss and damage in different contexts, and we need to understand how loss and damage is felt in different regions. So I think the storytelling part is very important in this process of establishing the loss and damage fund and identifying different elements of the funding arrangement. So I think that will be helpful in terms of how you've contribute. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. A final question? Okay. We don't have a lot of time. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay, my question is about the Loss and Damage Coalition. So I want to ask right now, the issues that we are only concentrating on the people who are connected. So what are the solutions on the people who are not connected, who don't even have any connection in regards to information about loss and damage, and those people are mostly affected people and they don't have any access? What are the solutions that we have for those people who are not connected?
Thank you for asking that question. Sorry, I think I don't, I didn't understood it correctly. Like, do you mean how do we connect our work to the people who is not connected to our network?
Yes, actually, what I'm saying is that there are people who are not connected, who don't have access to the information you are sharing right now, and those are the most affected people right now. All the people who are in this room, I don't think they're mostly affected rather than the people in the grassroots. So what are the solutions that we have to connect with those people?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question again. So I think, like, if I understood your question correctly, yeah, we Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. So it's a youth coalition. So we also have a limit to the resources and the capacity that we have, but we try our best to engage and to reach to the people who are most affected on the ground. Therefore, we try to focus more on the grassroots activities, because I'm from Nepal, Eva is from Rwanda. Like, there are young people from across the world. So we try to focus our activities in those grassroots level and like bring those in to bring those discussions, bring those impact in the like high level discussions that we have. We try our best, but then again, I think this is the thing that we all can do it together rather than just one coalition. You want to add?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to reach everyone, but in terms, as she said, it's a coalition. It's different youth from different organizations, from different countries, and bringing different knowledge together. And maybe an example of we reach is maybe through the loss and damage grant was one way of maybe reaching peoples on the ground and see how they can be part of the solution in addressing loss and damage. So there was like 10 different youth organizations who received the loss and damage grant and were able to help communities in their own country to address the impacts of loss and damage. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think we have reached the end of our session. Do we have time? If you have the time, okay, sure.
So there is one question online by Mohammed Nafil. Is there any research ongoing regarding the loss and damage observed in various parts of the world involving focusing specifically on youth?
Can you repeat, please? Is there
So is there
research
any
focused on
loss and
youth?
damage research ongoing which has a focus on youth?
Actually, UNICEF it's also working with the impacts on climate change and youth and children. I don't know if you would call that necessarily research, but they're doing a lot of assessments on the way that is happening and advocacy as well for it. They also have products like, for example, insurance for children, for young people as well. They're also so there is a lot of solutions that are happening with it. I am not familiar right now about, but I am sure there should be some. I think I can just reply by the group, the team that I'm part of. Unfortunately, right now we don't have one assessment on children and youth focused, but we do work with several networks of students and academia that involve them in many ways.
Yeah, sure. From UNICEF side, so yeah, we working a lot with children and young people, and if you are interested, so you can see our recently publication work is called CCRI, which is first time they did the vulnerability risk assessment of children around the globe. So it stands for Children Climate Risk Index. So that's one of our work, and we also have a new initiative that will be launched soon. It's called TNT, Today and Tomorrow Initiative, and we are launching it in 5 countries, where we are coming with this idea of ensuring the children. And the first it focuses on cyclone, but we are now maybe in second phase go for floods, and then we also having our another work which will be done. You can also take a look at NDCs. So UNICEF actually did the analysis of the different country NDCs and see what are the focus of those country and how much they are focusing on children and in young people. So there are some of our work which we have done, but still much is coming in the pipeline. Yeah, thanks.
If I can, there's another question. How can the cultural damages be worked upon in terms of loss and damage work? What is the approach? Has anything been done yet similar to this?
There are certain approaches to do that, to do some cultural, but I don't think they cover the diversity of issues and impacts that could be covering that. So there are losses of languages, for example, is something that we hear about. There's the way we do it, which is a little bit more geographically based. For example, the destruction of temples or cultural places, for example, that is a way we do assess that. But it's not very easy. I think that what the colleague here was talking about in terms of the storytelling, it plays a big role in understanding how the culture is being affected and maybe ways to estimate and harmonize this information to know what could be done so in other regions can be learned when similar issues happen.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and just to add on, and especially on else non-economic losses. So this within the 5 stream of frameworks or international mechanism, there's one working group which are exclusively working on non-economic losses, and they already have a recent study where they show the different mechanism how they can measure the non-economic losses. So there's a lot being there on the website. So you can take a look and see what are the different measures that have been used in past to measure non-economic losses.
Great. Thank you so much. I would like to thank very much our speakers today for the great presentation, and thank you all for participating in this session. I hope you enjoyed. I have put a final slide with some resources for additional learning where you can find more information, and you can also learn about upcoming climate classrooms on other topics. Thank you very much.
so we'll be starting the next session in the next 2 minutes. If everyone can like settle down, keep the conversations going, but please settle down so we can start the next session. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. We'll be getting started with the next session led by Youth for Climate.
And thank you to the previous session for the very interesting content. Clearly, it's generated a lot of discussion. So perhaps I'll get started. Good morning, everybody. And a warm welcome also to those who are joining us online. I saw when I last checked, there were more than 100 people online. So hopefully we can get some of their feedback as well during the session. My name is Roxani Rushas. I coordinate the Youth for Climate program at UNDP, the United Nations Development Program. Youth for Climate as a program kicked off in September as a partnership between UNDP and the government of Italy, building on recommendations from the Youth for Climate Manifesto of 2021, which I know many of you in this room also contributed to in the lead up to COP26. A core objective of Youth for Climate as of this year is to support youth-led climate solutions on the ground. So in this session, we'll be talking about what it takes. Well, first of all, we'll be sharing with you the funding opportunities that we've opened up and some other opportunities open to you and your networks through UNDP. But we'll also be talking about what it takes to nurture grassroots solutions into scalable programming. And many thanks to the Youth4Capacity program, our sister initiative at UNFCCC, for opening up this opportunity for us. Importantly, when we talk about scaling at UNDP, we don't necessarily only mean scaling in reach and numbers, but also we talk about scaling deep. Or bringing about change by shifting the deeper values, cultural beliefs, meanings, and practices of communities. And here there's a lot that we're learning from UNDP's network of accelerator labs, which cover 115 countries around the world, through which we're investing in reimagining the way we do sustainable development by tapping into the power of those local solutions and really recognizing that the knowledge and expertise of those who are closest to the problem matters most. To set the scene for our discussion, I'd like to just show you the trailer of a documentary called For Tomorrow that this network has produced to celebrate exactly this grassroots thinking approach.
Our planet is facing sustainability challenges like we've never seen before. From climate change to pollution to social inequality, people are rising to these challenges with ingenuity, resilience, and vision.
Más o menos ya va a ser como 10 años que nos está afectando bastante.
We are not accessible world, unfortunately.
Ôi, sao mà rác thối như thế này?
We have big problem with electricity.
How can we fix this? Where do we begin? We don't have the answers, but some might.
It's the people closest to the problem who have the most knowledge about that problem.
Mighty oaks come from small acorns, and the seeds of the smallest ideas, once nurtured, can change the world. This is the power of grassroots innovation, the power of local changemakers taking real actions to help those around them.
Emmanuel has just created Sierra Leone's first locally made solar-powered car that is eco-friendly.
Tôi đang là Trịnh Thị Hồng. Tôi đang là giám đốc doanh nghiệp mà tái biên chế phế phẩm hữu cơ thành chất tẩy rửa.
We have seen what's possible when we act as one. When we recognize great things can come from humble beginnings. When we dream together. When we innovate together. When we empower each other.
The question is always, what can one person do to save the world? An equally important question is, what do 8 billion people know?
Super. And the full documentary is available to watch on YouTube. Very much recommend it. So on this theme, great things come from humble beginnings. Joining me to share insights and learnings are, first off, representing Yango, who are a member of the Youth for Climate Advisory Committee, and specifically representing Yango's Finance and Markets Working Group. We have Erica Shananin Calvillo Ramirez. Erica is an indigenous Ngiwa descendant from Mexico and a Latin American studies student. She's a climate justice and plant-based food systems advocate. And from UNDP, we have two colleagues, Cassie Flynn, who is our head of climate policy and strategies, and Agostino Inguscio, who's the coordinator of UNDP's Rome Center for Climate Action and Energy Transition, which serves as the secretariat of the Youth for Climate program. So we'll be structuring this conversation around a framework developed by a group of students at Columbia University in collaboration with UNDP, which highlights three key pillars for what it takes to get an individual solution to impact. And these are, firstly, the contextual factors that influence the emergence of a solution and the ability to deploy it, so basically the enabling environment. Secondly, the characteristics that make up an innovative solution that is fit for purpose in a given local context. And thirdly, the factors that ultimately will influence the success and impact of a solution longer term. So to start with this first pillar, the contextual factors. We know that financial resources are one of the most important factors in the enabling environment that influence whether a solution can be deployed. Young people have repeatedly asked for more funding for their work on the ground. So Agostino, perhaps we could start with you sharing a little more about the funding opportunities that we're opening up through Youth for Climate starting this year. What do young people need to know about this?
Thank you for all of you to be here, and for the gracious hosting, of course, our colleagues from UNFCCC, and Roxani, since everyone was moving around at the time. Once again, she's the coordinator of the Youth for Climate Initiative, and so thank you also for chairing us. So essentially, in the context of this video, right? So what do we do to understand context better? In the UNDP, we listen to people, right? And so the message that came from young people across the world in terms of the contextual and enabling environment was loud and clear. And the first requirement was more capacity, both in terms of finance and other types of enablers. So let's start with finance, as Roxani was saying. So this year, Youth for Climate is funding solutions through an innovation challenge in 4 areas: urban sustainability, food and agriculture, energy and climate education. And the call for solutions is now closed at the end of the month of March, and we received over 1,100 applications. And the call for solutions will provide financial rewards for the winners that will be selected in October during the Youth for Climate conference that will take place in Rome, in Italy. And out of the 1,100 applicants, we expect to have in Rome 100 shortlisted candidates, and out of them roughly half of them will receive funding. So the funding that was pledged to this particular initiative, again by the government of Italy, which is the donor for the program, is 1 million euros. So it's quite substantial, but of course it's not enough, right? So here the question is, how do we present these applications, these solutions, in a way that then can attract more funding and be created in a sort of system, right? And here, this also drove our identification of the candidates for this, right? So the proposals are led by young people between the age of 18 and 29, and they're open to national UNDP program countries, so over 170 countries in the world. And in the applications, we had this focus on both strong project proposals of 1,000 words and budget and so forth, but with this idea, right, of creating an open playing field, also video, audios, right? There are various means through which the applications can be received. So, as we said, the application round for this year is finished, but we're really looking forward to harvest feedback, learning, and open a new application round already at the end of this year, right? So the pace of applications will speed up. So thank you, Roxana.
Thanks. And so Agostino mentioned this year we've been funding 4 areas, so climate education, food and agriculture, energy and urban sustainability. We'll have a different scope as in the next round of the call for solutions. So I'd just like to invite the audience also to contribute on Menti. You can go to menti.com and use the code 91323388. 91323388. And you can share with us what are some of the areas you would like to see Youth for Climate funding in the next round of the call for solutions, also based on needs you're hearing from your networks. Now, Cassie, of course, access to finance and other contextual factors, so for instance, access to technologies or access to the right kinds of training programs, all that is also highly dependent on enabling policies being in place. So as an expert in the policy sphere, what's your advice to young delegates in the room when it comes to advocating for that enabling environment for youth-led solutions?
Thank you, Roxani, and thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I think something that is so important about this is the ability to help people with good ideas to realize those good ideas, and that's when you need, of course, the financing, and you need support, you need partnerships. You need the right environment, as we talk about, the right enabling environment to be able to thrive. And this is something that we are very, very committed to, and we have seen, not just because it's something we believe in, but because this environment can make or break whether a good idea can be scaled up or face an immense number of challenges. And in the case of youth, this is incredibly important because young people play such a unique role in the climate crisis. And we see so much in the headlines and advocacy and really pushing leaders, and this is really fantastic. And now we have to complement this with support for the good ideas that young people have. And even Eric and I we were talking last night about some of the really incredible work that's going on around the world, and being able to advocate not just for those direct resources, but that enabling environment. And within the Climate Promise, this is something that UNDP has that launched a few years ago, and we have supported 127 countries' NDCs. 85% of the developing world has received support from the Climate Promise in one way or another. And we have been very committed to really trying to support young people to be as engaged in this process as possible, because we've seen a direct correlation between the successes of those NDCs and the level of ambition of those NDCs with the levels of inclusion, including with young people in those conversations. And so within that, there's a lot of pathways. There's getting involved with, with these NDC policy conversations. There's the fact that you're here as a part of these negotiations. There's, the ability to start to bring your voices to the ways that these decisions are made in a way that can help you be able to access the type of support that you need. So this is something that we are very, very committed to, and something that we're looking forward to scaling up as much as possible with all of your help. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassie, and thanks for the great ideas that are coming up on screen, and great to see that some of the areas we're supporting this year are still very much prominent on your among your priorities. Shannonine, listening to Cassie and Agostino, maybe to come in from the perspective of Youngo's working group on finance and markets, what are you learning in that working group about the key factors that shape this enabling environment? What are some of your priorities in that working group?
Yes, in the working group of climate and finance of Youngo, we are actually now trying to create this climate finance reporting training, which is like an open call still, and through where we actually want people to build the capacities and to be more engaged in these scenarios. So I think that this environment, that the one we are creating here and all these events, are like the places where the people who are already leading the solutions are actually meeting the people, you know, with the funding, with everything, all the resources and platforms to scale those solutions. So yeah, I believe that as young people and as we are the ones of the most vulnerable to the climate crisis, it is in these spaces where, in order to defend our life, the solutions are being created. So yeah, I believe the solutions already exist at the grassroots level in the communities. So yeah, what we need are more of these spaces where actually funders, actually the representatives of the UN and people with that, all these amazing leaders meet. So yeah, I believe that with Youngo, we are also trying to create more of these spaces. So yeah, also in here, the team that is covering and that is supporting the ESBs is actually also trying to build all those networks.
Super, thank you. So to move on maybe to that second pillar of that framework that we saw, we've talked about the enabling environment that allows solutions to emerge in the first place, but then how do we also make sure that that enabling environment is supporting the right kinds of solutions in any given context? So Cassie, going back to you, maybe there's another funding opportunity that we have at UNDP that's very important for young people, the small grants program. How is that? Could you maybe share with us how that is set up to empower communities to participate in the decision making around which solutions are relevant in any given context?
Absolutely. Some of you may know about the small grants program. It has been around for many years, and the idea is to be able to support communities to be able to take action on a number of different topics, including on climate, and to really shorten the distance between discussions like this at the global level to what communities are experiencing and seeing. And there's a few lessons learned out of this that I think are really important as we're all thinking about this work moving forward, because I think it's easy to talk about this. It's easy to say, oh, we need to connect this, we need to support. But when you get to the details of that, and when you get to what actually has to happen, we have to be very mindful about this. We have to be very mindful from not just the processes that we create, but ensuring that they are as inclusive as possible, and even with languages, and making sure that we're meeting communities where they are. A few pieces to this. One that is very critical is, of course, community ownership. Really taking the lead from communities. They know their context best. They know the solutions that they want, and to be able to support that, and to support that in a way that isn't just about sort of one-off solutions, but how do you do this over a long period of time, and really investing in that. Being able to invest in on the ground, being able to invest that are trying to build their communities in a way, and in particular, they're facing the climate crisis that is on their doorstep. Being integrated across from the global, regional, national levels, being able to connect communities with each other, to be able to share ideas, share resources, share energy in being able to pull this off. There's a lot of communities that can be, and leaders that can be learning from each other, because they may be facing some of the same struggles, maybe facing some of the same opportunities that can then be leveraged for each other. And then, of course, being able to have innovation. And to some extent, it's also about being able to give space to people to be creative. The climate crisis is overwhelming. And when you are on the front lines of it, it is pretty terrifying. And when you can say, all right, well, there are things that I can do, I have ideas, and I'm not alone in those ideas. I'm not alone in being able to envision how something can move forward, and I have partners that can help me with finance, partners that can help me with logistical things like permitting for something, or being able to help engage other people in this. This is something that is really critical throughout, and we've learned this a lot through the small grants program, and are continuing trying to learn. And this is why I think these opportunities and being able to share them with you and saying, hey, how can we do this together, is a critical piece of how we tackle the climate crisis. So, thank you.
Thanks, Cassie. So just to share also some details on how to access funding through the Small Grants Program, if you're not aware of that, there's a national coordinator established in every country that you can reach out to and ask for advice on how to apply for the program. I'll share at the end of this presentation the link where you can look up the focal point for your country. But importantly, there's a national steering committee set up in every country where I think in over 70% of these steering committees, there's a youth representative on the steering committee guiding the decision on where to allocate the funding. So really recommend looking into that, because over 40% of small grants program funded projects have active youth participation or leadership in their implementation. There is also a dedicated innovation program on youth and climate change that has been piloted since 2019 through the Small Grants Program. That's currently operating in 11 pilot countries. So those are Armenia, Burundi, Cape Verde, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Malaysia, Sierra Leone, Seychelles, Togo, Tunisia, and Ukraine, and that will likely be spreading to more countries. So worth tapping into this opportunity also to keep an eye on which countries this specific youth and climate change window might open up to going forward. So we've spoken here about the opportunity to involve the community in decision making on how to allocate the funding, but what are the criteria we should be looking at in determining whether a solution is fit for purpose? Which are the solutions that most most fit in a given community's context that funders should be prioritizing, but likewise some of the criteria that applicants might need to keep in mind as they put together project proposals to make sure they're more likely to succeed in accessing funding, but also in having longer term impact. So Shananin, from your perspective, what are some of these criteria that are important to look at? And I'd like to invite the audience to contribute here as well on the Menti. Again, the link is menti.com and the code is 91323388. So what criteria are important from your perspective to determining whether a solution is fit for purpose? Shananin, over to you.
Yes, I believe that in order to actually support the solutions that are being created by the grassroots communities at the local level, it is important that from this side that the call for solutions is like diversified, because sometimes it is a form that it has like a single format. So I believe that it is important that it can also be spread in a different, communicated well, in different spaces, because sometimes that is like the way people actually know about these calls and about the funders, about the support. So yeah, I believe that also in that sense, it should be that the communities need to also know how to sell their work, because sometimes it is not only that the impact is measurable in numbers, it is sometimes it is represented in how the communities are feeling on how it's changing the environment in their local communities. So that is also something about that we have to build capacity on the storytelling of these solutions. And because I believe as well that from our perspectives, like also Yongo is made of a lot of grassroots and local communities. So we actually at Legado Gaia, which is like our organization, tried to apply to this grant. But yeah, it is like, as we are all volunteers and as we are also students, have a lot of, like responsibilities. It is sometimes that we do not have enough time, so sometimes we do need also like support to be actually able to go through the whole application. So also something as well is that sometimes the funders call these like they only provide funds to the trust, by trust. So also I think that is important to build on that, because when you actually know like the people who are leading this call for proposals, that are leading the funding, it is more likely that you will be, like recognized or like remembered. And that is how I see that a lot of people know that you can actually get to the grants and get like the money and then distribute it. So yeah, I believe that in order to also support the solutions that are being recognized by the communities, it is important to see who is organizing all those solutions and to see how most vulnerable communities, like indigenous communities, are being included, or are they only, like being used as tokens, So I believe that to see how that engagement is actually like creating change inside the organization is important to also know how the solution is going to be replicated.
Super, thank you. Thank you. So Agostino, in the context of the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions, what are some of the criteria we're looking at there, and what should young people in the room know about what we're looking at when reviewing project proposals?
Thank you. So first of all, this is the pilot phase, right? So it's the first year that we are running this. We are incredibly excited also by the turnout of the number of applicants and the quality of the applications which we're reviewing now. And of course, this is the first step, right? So it's a first step, and so your point is very well received, right? So in terms of the design going forward, I think we have a lot to improve from these conversations. And my point is that what we're doing is only significant as much as a hands-on fertile soil, right? And this is also what Cassis was saying in terms of the years and years of the small grant program, right? So these years and years of success, but also, sometimes failure, that sort of created the knowledge within UNDP, right? To be able to then say, okay, this is how Youth for Climate Solutions will be designed. And my thinking is a question of scale. So we'll go back to this at the end of the panel as well, right? So I think we have all the right ingredients, but we have to make sure that there is enough of them for people to really be able to participate significantly. So in terms of the solutions themselves, right? So we start with the what, I suppose, right? So the first criteria that we consider, as Cassie was saying, the crisis is upon us and creates also these anxieties, but we are looking for concrete solutions that have a way of meaningfully addressing the environmental crisis and the climate crisis. And at the same time, and this is important that both of you mentioned this, is that we're looking at initiatives that can positively impact local communities, right? So we're working a lot through the UNDP network of offices, right, to ensure that this is the case. And then, because this is a strategic priority for UNDP, but I mean much broader than that, we're looking at solutions that intentionally contribute to gender equality and equalities and more inclusive societies. Then we go to the how, right? So this is not a lot of money, but it's money which is in grant format. And actually, I had this very interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago about the fact that this is actually one of the few situations, right, where there is not all these grants through a trustee scheme and so forth, right? So we're really sure that this can achieve the results in terms of achieving the right people that want to implement the solutions. But this creates, of course, from UNDP a lot of responsibility in terms of monitoring and so forth. So, we are looking also for solutions which have a structured work plan and approach. So something where for us, it's really not easy, but possible to identify context-specific deliverables. And then we are also looking as you both said, to the degree of innovation. But when we talk about degree of innovation, we're not really thinking about, something that has to be like, techie or innovative in that sense, right? But, something that has also, a dimension of frugal innovation where maybe is a solution that has been around for a long time, and what was missing is this sort of South-South learning, right, that we discussed. Apart from these criteria, we are looking to ensure a geographical balance of the pool of candidates, and then really we want to, and this is more work for next year, we are really designing how to create these exchanges that Cassis was mentioning, right? So, some solutions can learn from, being cross-disseminated across the various geographical areas. So this is where we are at, and we are very excited to do even better next year. Thank you.
Great, so a few things for you to keep in mind as you look out for the next round of the Call for Solutions, if you're looking at putting together a proposal for that. To move on to the third pillar that we had seen in that framework, so we've spoken about the contextual factors that determine whether solutions emerge in the first place. We've spoken about their design and what funders look for in project proposals. Now, in the third round, let's focus on what kind of support youth-led solutions actually need in order to have sustained impact. So, Shananin, to start with you this time, what examples have you seen of youth-led solutions that have scaled, and what did it take in your experience to achieve that scale?
Yes, from my experience, I was talking also to all the panelists about how there was this experience that we had a couple of months ago with the caravan that was in the south, and how actually this network that was created, it had a lot of support from a lot of international organizations, and it was that funding, the one that actually made possible that the caravan was made, So the caravan went through all these territories in the south of Mexico, and now, thanks to the networks that were built, is proposed to be next year done in Central America. So yeah, I believe that all these solutions that are being created, they have more impact when they network between each other and they create these collaborations and joint works. So it is, I think, that way how solutions scale, because I also have seen these youth-led solutions like Reared and Youthopia, all these networks, they actually build all this impact by engaging with more local communities, by engaging all these solutions that were disseminated from a lot of places, and when they join together is how they actually create more impact. So I believe that now that we're here, now that we have these spaces where we can meet each other, is how we can build those connections to actually scale our awful solutions and build impact in the communities we are from.
So really speaking to the importance of partnerships and having an outlook from the beginning as to who you need on board to scale or impact longer term, and could be at community level, at country level, or in fact in other countries or regions, as you correctly pointed out. Great. Agostino, coming back to Youth for Climate, what support are we providing to young solution holders, or looking at providing to set them up for success?
Thank you. No, and again, like going back to Shananin's point in terms of how difficult it actually is, to access funding, I think that the work that we're doing through Youth for Climate comes much before the solution holder, right? So the first thing that I think was really, for me, was very interesting to witness. I joined UNDP in September, so this is the first, I suppose, witnessing moment that I had of this sort of like power structure, right, the UNDP has at global level. So it was essentially to see the reach that through the network of the country offices we have to mobilize communities, which was fantastic. But also, I think in terms of learning from our side, you said the first thing, of course, is for opportunities to be known. And here the role of partnership has been really essential, right? So for instance, through partners such as Connect for Climate, for instance, we were able to like reach a huge pool of applicants. But what really I think made the difference, it's something that we started almost as a sort of, a little experiment, right? So through the UN Volunteers program, we established a window of 2 months where potential applicants could book in sessions with UNVs. And I would like to acknowledge, especially two in particular, that did tremendous, unpaid, I should say, work. Kuzefi Isaka Dudbane and Silvia Alfonsi, who basically were at the disposal of potential applicants for a period of 2 months. And they managed to have one-on-one mentorship with 110 applicants. And 96% of the applicants that went through this said that they found this incredibly beneficial in designing their ideas and defining them further. So the lesson learned for me there is that this that started as a little bit of an add-on compared to other ways should become a structural part of the Youth for Climate offer. And then the very important point here is the point on partnerships, right? Which is also why it's super exciting to be here today at the Youth for Capacity initiative of UNFCCC, because I see Youth for Capacity as, aggregating all this capacity out there that is provided by other organizations. And for us, we want to partner, of course, with Youth for Capacity, but beyond that, we want to make sure that for each one of the key priorities of the needs of applicants and the people implementing, the winners, so to speak, we want to accompany them with the right mentorship and programs and through the right partners, right? So we are really quite scientifically, I would say, looking through the partnerships that we had to ensure that the partners that we select for each one of the strategic areas of Youth for Climate are the right ones that can support these young winners, so to speak, in actually becoming the winners, which is, for these solutions that they're proposing to be able to achieve their results. Thank you.
Great. So also a call for partnerships for you to reach out to us. If your organization or organizations in your countries you think have the tools that could help the solutions that we'll be working with to scale. Cassie, a final question for you. What does it take from your perspective for grassroots innovations and individual solutions to scale or drive systems change at a more systemic level, given the scale of the challenges we're dealing with?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's worth sort of thinking a little bit about what we mean by scale. Because in some cases, scaling upwards and being able to have something scale at a massive level is an absolute priority. But in other moments, maybe that's not the best thing to do. And maybe when we talk about scale, it's also about scaling the way that we work. How do we change the way that we work? I was in the hallway earlier, but I understand the session before this was on loss and damage. Was that right? How many of you are hopeful that we are going to resolve issues globally, not just the negotiations, but globally around loss and damage? This is really telling, right? Because loss and damage during your lifetimes is going to be something that the global community has to come together to resolve. And we have to figure out how to get ourselves out of this mess. And the only way we're going to be able to do this is by changing how we have done it for years and years and years. And I think when we talk about supporting local communities, we talk about building capacities, we talk about all of the good ideas that are happening, this is really talking about how do we change the way that we've done things. And I think here, when we talk about scale, I really encourage everyone, for as much as we think about scale as in like, all right, we just have to have this go big. And in many cases, it does need to go big. Connect with the NDC processes, connect what's going on at the national level. But also be relentless about how you do it. Be relentless about the methods that you're using, the levels of inclusion, the way that and maybe it's just a matter of you're going to ensure that everything you do is translated into the languages of the communities that need them. Things like that are so important. And I think, being able to look at when we are overwhelmed by these problems and these challenges like loss and damage, that it's not just about, okay, what do we do in this moment, but it's also the how. And scaling the how, I think, is going to be critical moving forward. Thank you.
What an important message to close on. Thanks, Cassie. We'll open up for some Q&A, and Riti, maybe you can let us know if there's any questions or comments coming in online as well. While you think about any questions you might have, just to share some links to resources we've mentioned today. So first of all, join the Youth4Climate online engagement platform. That's the first link here if you're not already a member. This is a new platform. It already has 6,000 members, but we're really looking to strengthen it this year. And this is where we'll be posting crucial opportunities, including the next call for solutions under Youth4Climate. The second resource here is the website of the Small Grants Program that I mentioned, where you can find a list of all the national coordinators in your countries that you can reach out to about funding opportunities through the SGP. Thirdly, have a look also at the website of UNDP's Accelerator Lab Network. As we mentioned, they're present in 115 countries and territories online, and they online around the world, and they have a dedicated solutions mapper in each of these country teams that is there to support in bringing together an ecosystem of partners to support grassroots solution holders. And you'll find their contacts on this website as well for every country. I also wanted to flag, especially for those of you who come from Asia Pacific, you may be aware of the Youth Empowerment Climate Action Platform, YCAP, that's been established by UNDP and UNFCCC in Asia Pacific, and they've produced at the recent ESCAP forum a really interesting compendium of best practices in youth and climate governance, including in fostering youth-led innovation. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. And this is a first draft that's online, and they're welcoming contributions until the 30th of July. And the final version of that document will be submitted to the Asia Pacific Climate Week in 2023. So those are the resources I wanted to share. And now I already saw a hand was up earlier. So for any questions, the floor is open. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks for those presentations. My name is Jean Bitren Mandu from Zimbabwe. I work with earthday.org as well as AIG Zimbabwe. So we were a beneficiary of the Climate Promise, the first one, and we did some consultations on NDCs, developed policy briefs, gathered some youth initiatives there. Just to ask on the follow-up that comes with, this opportunity for small grants. I know it's a competitive world out there. Are there specific resources that are probably assigned to the country so that we have continuity and follow-ups and sustainability? Because you reached out, you get some comments, some feedback, and you would want to see those initiatives being implemented. Is there like a specific investment on that, or it's another new program that will leave other initiatives that we have invested our time, and our efforts in hanging without funding that comes through? For instance, this could have been a first session of training of trainers who can also go and capacitate others, gather more information. And when we speak of NDCs again, they are well known within communities. So I would like to see the engagement continuing as well. Thank you.
Maybe to take another one. Yeah.
So thank you very much. I'm Kevin Kojo Osa from Togo. I'm leading a youth organization that is called OJET, and we have applied for the first round of the call for proposals. And I can assure you that it is not really easy. As me, particularly, I'm from a French-speaking country. all the proposal is in English. We have tried to do it, but I think for the next, but I am imagining how it could be difficult for other youths as me who are speaking French, and they don't really, it's not easy for them to speak English. So I think, I don't know, but maybe think about to have it in French so that to allow those from French speaking regions to also be able to apply, because the man in the middle, I forget his name, but was saying that you are trying to deal with geographical barriers, but it will also be good to deal with language barrier. And also going on, I think it's also good to look for collaboration between the Youth4Climate participants. From our side, we have been 3. One from Belgium, one from Benin, and me from Togo. And we have a strong team that we have, so it has been a very strong team, everybody with his vision of how he thinks that the project can be done. And then we try to have something to apply. So I think you could also be based on those criteria to put participant, Youth4Climate participants as they are ambassadors of the Youth4Climate manifesto, to work together to have something between themselves, so that to promote collaboration. So talking about mentorship, I think it is a very good opportunity, but I'm begging you to not put a lot of money in those mentorship program than the action that should have done on the ground, because sometimes that is something happening. You may see big programs with a lot of money or a lot of funding invested in capacity building for the project managers, but when it's come to action on the ground, it's just little funding, and sometimes you become expert, but to go to action or to go onto the ground, it is very difficult to have impact on the vulnerable communities. Thank you very much.
Super important points. Thank you so much. I'll also share a few responses, but maybe to open up, maybe to Cassie on the NDC related question.
Thank you for that. I think you bring up a very, very important point, which is this idea of continuity. How do we ensure that we have, over time, all of the good work that is invested in sort of one project can be, built upon, and you're not starting from scratch for the other one. The climate promise, as a part of the climate promise, that we had specific financial support for youth in every single country. It was 127 countries. This next phase has launched with 67 countries, and we're doing a phased approach for the rest. I'll have to look, and you and I maybe we can follow up, particularly on the Zimbabwe case, but we are maintaining that commitment to be able to provide support within that NDC process for young people in this phase. So it would be great to chat about that. And I think too, being able to ensure that all of the good work too that has been going on is recognized in these new opportunities, and maybe we can figure out, especially for Youth4Climate or things like that, how we that connection is a part of that process. I think it's a really good point. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also, on this point, I wanted to say that, again, the importance of the fertile soil, right? So the importance of building from where we are onwards. So for me, the climate promise, for instance, you can't basically waste, right, the capital of having worked with 86 developing countries, right? So to me, that is basically the quintessential guide that we have also in all that there is multilateral fora, right? So G7, G20, G77, we have to stay the course, right? Because only things that are tried and fail and retried can actually lead us to success. So this is a fantastic moment of follow-up. So in terms of the more practical aspects, Kevin, I think your feedback is terrific, and So first of all, on the questions about languages, right? So it's clear, right, that we're going into in that direction, not just French, but of course at least all the UN official languages. And again, I need to thank here the support from the regional hubs of UNDP, right, that for instance for this year helped us to translate all the material into Spanish, because we were really like struggling with representation from, and we have a good, the person that did it for us there. And this in a sense was just something that happened through this feedback, this continuous feedback, right? And the reason why it didn't happen before goes to your point on capacity building and funding, right? It went through the reason is that we try to have all the money that we could spare allocated directly to young people to implement their solutions. But you know, I think that also the learning process here tells us that instead, for instance, more investment upfront should be done in that sense, right, to support the outreach of applicants. And on this, I wanted to acknowledge something really, I would say, moving that happened to me through this process, which was the support, the reaching out of the Soka Gakkai Institute, a cultural Buddhist institute in Italy, and some of the representatives are here today. They reached out to basically just say that they wanted to support young people, right? So they allocated a very significant amount of money, right? So they risk to become the main donor if they continue with the support through solutions. But the point that they brought to the table was that they only wanted each single euro of this to get to young people, right? And I think that this is basically our guiding star in the Youth for Climate Solutions part, and which is basically to say that the capacity that we want to use is capacity to make sure that we can access more people and empower them to succeed. And of course, in this, it's crucial to consider the role of partnerships, right? So for instance, again, being here at the Youth4Capacity event for us is also fantastic, right? Because it also tells us that there are synergies that we can build, right? That we don't have to like do everything ourselves, right? So we are here also to structure much more closely this partnership. So thank you, Kevin, again.
Just to acknowledge also your point around joining forces across countries, that's really important, and perhaps the engagement platform can be one space for you to reach out and identify others you could submit joint project proposals with. But also through that mentorship and learning offer, we want to create opportunities for peer-to-peer exchange, right? So for these projects to learn from each other through the implementation process. And yes, just to add to what Agostino was saying, all the partners that we'll be working with on that mentorship and learning offer are doing that entirely pro bono. So kudos to them. But there's so much out there. There's really no need to be developing new resources here, but really creating a coalition of support. Thank you so much. We're at time, but just to give Shannonine a chance to come in with any last words as well.
Yeah, also acknowledging the question of our colleague, yeah, really important that we diversify the way we do these calls for proposals, because I believe sometimes it only gets with, like the privileged people that we are allowed to be here, and we have to engage the people that are actually on the ground, and they oftentimes do not know like English or even like the way of bureaucracy that implies to get all these funds. So yeah, I do believe that it's something that we have to talk more about and build all these connections to actually create solutions and scale them up.
Thank you all so much for joining this session. We'll be sticking around for a few minutes as there isn't, I think, another session immediately after this one. Maybe Ridi will tell us a bit more about the program for this afternoon. But just to flag also that on the 12th, so next Monday, Youth for Climate will be at the ACE poster gallery session with other initiatives. So do come to talk to us there as well. I'm new to the initiative myself, so here to meet as many of you as possible. So don't be shy to come and say hello. Thanks very much also to the panelists for making time to share some interesting resources and advice. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So we'll be breaking for lunch, and our next session will start at 1. So we'll see you all back here in this room. Thanks.